Hey, this is Elijah from the Breakdance team, and in today's video, I'll show you how to create a website with a sticky header, some nice entrance animations, and a contact form, as well as a blog page to display your blog posts. And we'll be using the free version of Breakdance. First, we need to go out to breakdance.com, click Get Breakdance, and go ahead and grab the free version. Once you click Get Started, you'll be able to complete your free checkout. Then you can go to breakdance.com/portal and go to the Downloads tab to access your download file. Make sure to grab the most recent version, and then hop over to the License Keys tab to grab your license key. This is just needed so that your website can receive automatic updates for the free version of Breakdance. Now I'm going to hop over to the site we'll be building on. It's completely fresh right now. I just installed WordPress and deleted a couple of the default pages. I'm going to hop over to the WordPress admin panel here, and we just need to install Breakdance to get started. So we'll go to Plugins and click Add Plugin. Then we'll upload the Breakdance file we downloaded. Go ahead and open that, install now, and then click Activate Plugin. Now we'll want to go to Breakdance Settings and make sure we have our license key activated. And once that's done, go over to Theme and make sure Disable Theme is checked, because this just makes everything easier when it comes to designing the site. Now we just need to create a couple of pages. First, we'll want a home page, so we'll click Add Page and type Home for the title and publish that. We'll come back and edit these here in a minute, but I just want to lay all the groundwork first. This one will be our blog page. Click Publish. And then back on the WordPress side, we're going to want to go to Settings, Reading, and make sure we assign those pages here. So the home page should be Home, and the post page should be Blog. Now we'll save that. And the last thing we need to do before we start designing is go to Appearance, Menus, and make sure we have a menu. We'll call it Nav, hit Create Menu, and then we'll add both our blog and our home page to the menu, and then drag the home page up. Now we'll save that, and we can go over to Pages, open up the home page, and click Edit in Breakdance. This is going to be a personal website or a website for an author, so we're going to start with a big, full-height, 2-column section to display our author's picture and a brief intro. So we'll click the plus sign and we'll go to our elements list here. Note that since we're using Breakdance Free, some of the elements are marked as Pro only. You can still trial these elements, but they won't work fully until you upgrade to Breakdance Pro, so we're going to avoid those for this tutorial. All we need right now is a simple section. Now we want this to take up the full viewport height, so we're going to go to Size, we're going to set the height to Custom, then we'll set the min height to 100, and then we'll type VH to change that pixel unit over to the VH unit. Now we want to set the width to Full. We also want to set it to have 0 padding all the way around. So we'll type 0 for padding and then click Apply All. Now we need to add a columns element inside of this section. So we'll click the plus icon again and we'll click Columns. And we'll choose the 50/50 layout. We also want the columns element to take up the full viewport height. So we'll go to Custom Height and set the min height to 100 VH so it matches the section it's in. Now we want to go to spacing and set the column gap to 0 because we want these two columns right next to each other. Now for the left column, we're going to set the background as an image of the author. So we'll select it and go over to Background in the Properties panel on the left, and we'll choose Type Image. Now we'll choose an image. We don't have any images uploaded yet, so I'm going to upload some images for this website that we'll use throughout the design. And we'll click Open. And once those have uploaded, we can choose our image of our author here. Click Choose. Now it's a little misaligned, so let's go to Image Settings and set Position to Center. That looks much better. Now we'll go to Overlay and we'll choose a color. You can click the little color box to pull up the color picker and click and drag to choose your color. But I know which color I want. I'm going to do DA722E, which is an orange color. Let me get rid of that extra 4 there at the beginning. And then I want to reduce the transparency just to add a little bit of a tint to this image. We'll be using warmer colors like this throughout our design, which you'll see when we start setting up our global colors here in a moment. Now we want to move into the right column. First, let's make sure everything's laid out how we want it. I want everything to be vertical and aligned to the left, but vertically I want it all centered. And then because I want the content in this column to not be right up against the image, I'm going to go to spacing and add 32 pixels of padding all the way around. Now we're going to add a text element. So we'll click the plus icon and we can find the text element here or search for it by typing. And we'll click text to add it to our design. This is going to say author. So we'll double click it to change the text and then type what we want. And then we'll go over to the design settings for this element, go to typography, and I want to change the font family to Dancing Script. I also want to set the font size to 32 pixels. Now I'm going to add a heading for our author name. So we'll find heading and click that, and we'll type in our author name, Emily Saint. Now we need a text element below that. So let's click add again, find text, and click that to drop it in below the heading. I'm going to double click the text to edit it, select it all, and then paste in my author bio. Now I want to go over to the design settings for this text element, go to spacing, and add 16 pixels of margin to the top and 32 pixels to the bottom. Now we just need a button and then we're done with the content. So we'll go back over to add and find button and drop in a button. Now we can double click to edit the text here, just like we did the text elements, or as with any element that has text, we can also edit the text in the content tab of the properties panel. Here we'll type meet Emily. And we're going to have this cause the viewport to scroll down to the next section. So we'll add an ID here of intro, and then we'll make sure to add that ID to the next section once we create it. Now we're ready to add some animations to these columns. So I'll select the left column. We'll go to the settings tab and go to animations. We're looking for an entrance animation. So we'll open up the animation settings and choose a type. We're going to do slide left. I'll change the duration to 500 milliseconds. And then we need one for the right column as well. So let's go over to the settings tab, animations, entrance animations. Animation type is going to be slide right. We'll set the same duration, 500 milliseconds, but we'll delay it by 250 milliseconds. This will cause the left column to animate in first, followed by the right column. Let's save that and I'll refresh on the front end to show you how that looks. That's a really nice premium looking effect. Let's go back into Breakdance. This already looks really good, but we want to make it our own a little bit by adjusting our global styles, which will apply to everywhere on our website. Once this step is done, pretty much everything we add after that is going to look on brand for us automatically. So to do that, we go to the three-dot menu and global settings. Here we have a bunch of options, but we're going to start with colors. First, let's set the background color, and then let's set the text and heading colors to an orange. And we'll just copy that color and use that for our headings as well. You can see how that's kind of warming everything up. But our button definitely needs an adjustment. So let's go to buttons next. We'll go to primary, which is the style being used here, and let's set the background color. That looks good, but there's not enough contrast between the background and the text. So let's go to button typography and let's choose our text color. That looks much better. Now I do want these buttons to be completely square, so I'll click that to avoid any border radius. Now for our final touch, we can adjust the site-wide typography. Let's open up the typography area, and for the heading, we're going to choose Playfair Display. For the body, we'll choose Meriwether Sands. These are a little too heavy for my liking, so let's go to Advanced, Body, and we'll change the font weight to 300. Now let's adjust the weight for the headings as well. So we'll open up the headings area, go to All Headings, and then change the font weight to 400. That looks much better. Let's go ahead and save. And now we're ready to continue building the rest of the page. Let's go ahead and drop in the next section. So we'll click Add at the top left of the screen, and we'll click Section, which will put it right below our first section. Let's open Layout and make sure it's set to Vertical Layout and align everything to the left. Now let's open Size. I want this to be a little bit narrower, so we'll do a custom width, and the container width should be 800 pixels. Now we'll add a heading element. This needs to be an H2, so we'll change the tag. Then we'll add a text element, and the text element needs some spacing. So we'll go to the Design tab, Spacing, margin top will be 16 pixels, and margin bottom will be 32 pixels. Now we just need a button, so we'll click Add, and we'll find Button and click to add that. Now let's add our text content. So we'll select the heading and paste in our text. Then we'll do the same thing with the text element. Go to the Content tab and paste in the text. Finally, we need to change the text on the button, so we'll do the same thing there, and this would be an external link to something like Amazon. Now the next section will be a little more interesting. We're going to do a grid layout. So let's close out this side panel since we don't need it right now, and we'll click Add and add a new section. We want a border around each of our grid items, but if we use the border setting on each item, you'll end up with a thicker border where two items meet. To resolve that, we're simply going to emulate the border with the background color of the section, and then use our spacing to allow that background color to be visible between the items. So let's start with setting our background color. We'll start with our text color, and then we're going to reduce the opacity a bit to make it a little less emphasized. Now let's set up our grid layout. Let's go to Layout, choose the grid option, 2 items per row, and 1 pixel between items. Now let's go to Size, and let's set the width to full. Now we need to go into spacing and make sure we have 1 pixel padding on top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. This 1 pixel padding here and in the layout space between items setting is what's going to emulate a border. Now we need to add a div. Let's select div. Now let's adjust the layout settings for this div. We want it to lay out the inner items vertically, but we want to align them to the left and then vertically align them in the middle. Now we need to set the background color to our global background color. Next, let's adjust the container size. Let's set the minimum height to 500 pixels and then the padding to 32 pixels all the way around. Now let's add a heading and set it to H3. And then let's add a text element. And we want a little bit of spacing between these two items, so we'll go to the Design tab for the text element, go to Spacing, and add 16 pixels of margin top. Now we can duplicate this div 3 more times, and we get this nice grid layout with a 1 pixel border between all items. Let's go ahead and paste in our content. First we'll do this heading, and then the text content. Now we'll do this heading, and its text content. Now let's do the last 2. There we go. Now you can see our grid section with 4 elements, and each one appears to have a 1 pixel border, but we don't have that stacking effect that you would have if you used an actual border on each div. Instead, we're just seeing the background color of the section they're inside of. Our next section is going to be the same as our first section, so we can copy and paste it. Let's go ahead and select here, and then we can click the up arrow on our little label here until we get to the section. Now we can hit Command or Control C to copy it. Go down here, select this section, and paste it in. And that'll drop it in right below it. Now we just want to swap these columns because I want an image on the right and the text on the left this time. To do that, we'll need to open the structure panel, which is right here. And to make it a little easier to see what we're doing, we'll hit the collapse button. And let's select the section we want to work in. And now we can see our 2 columns. We just need to drag this bottom one up to the top, which will move it to the left. But now our animations are coming in from the wrong direction, so let's go over to the Settings tab, Animations, Entrance Animation, and let's change this to Slide Left. And then we'll do the opposite for the other column. We'll go over to the Settings tab, Animations, Entrance Animation, and set it to Slide Right. Now we just need to change the content. For the image, we'll change it to one of the images that I uploaded earlier. So we'll go to the background area and click Choose on the image. And we'll pick this image instead. Now let's swap out the content. I want this text to say Booking, and then we'll paste in the content for the heading, and do the same for the text. For the button, we'll say Book Emily, and then we will link this to a section with the ID of Booking. Now let's go ahead and create our booking section, which will have a contact form in it. We'll use this section, so we'll copy it and then paste it below the section we just created. And in this section, we just need to get rid of this text and this button. And then we'll go to Add, and we'll search for Form, and we'll add a form builder. And I actually do want some text above this form, so I'll go up here and grab this text element, and then I'll select the heading and paste it in right below there. And then let's swap out the content and do the same for the text element. Make sure we select everything and then paste in our content. Note that because we set up our global styles, our labels are the correct color, and our button looks just like the other buttons across our page. Now for the form, we need to tell it what to do when somebody submits a message. So we'll select it, and in the Content tab, we want to go to Actions. Note that many of these form actions are Pro only, so we're going to avoid those. The only one we want is Store Submission. We'll get rid of the email action, and you can configure how these submissions will be stored, including the title, whether to store uploaded files, and a couple of other options. Now let's save that, and let me show you really quick how to access your form submissions. If we go back to the WordPress admin panel and go to Breakdance, Form Submissions, this is where you'll see all of your form submissions. Now let's head back to our design. And just make sure everything is saved one last time before we move on to the header and footer. Now, since we're already here at the bottom of the design, let's go ahead and add our footer. We'll just add a section and a text element. And now we can go ahead and paste in our footer text. Let's select the section and go ahead and center everything. Perfect. Now we can move on to our header, which we're going to make a sticky header that overlays this first section. So the first thing we need to do is add a new section, and that's going to drop it in right below this one, but we want it at the very top. Now let's go ahead and make sure everything is centered, both vertically and horizontally. Then let's set the background to a transparent version of our text color. We can adjust this later if we need to. Now let's go down to spacing and set it to 12 pixels padding on the top and bottom. Now we can add our menu element. We'll search for menu, and we'll use the WP menu item, and make sure your menu is chosen. Then we'll go to Design, Desktop Menu, Links, Typography, and we'll set these to our background color. And now that we have that, it looks like we need to darken up our background a bit. So let's go back to our section, and let's adjust the opacity a little bit. That looks better. Now we need to establish our overlay effect, which we'll do with our margin bottom. First, we need to know how tall this section is. One way to do that is by inspecting it on the front end. So we can jump up to the front end, and we can right-click this section and click Inspect. And down here in our DevTools, we can go to Computed, and we can see that it's 1080 pixels wide by 53.9 pixels tall. But we also have 12 pixels of padding, which add to the height. So 53.9 plus 24, which comes out roughly to around 78. So we'll use that for our negative bottom margin, negative 78 pixels. The positioning is correct, but we need this section to actually lay on top of the section below it. So let's go over to our Settings tab, go to Advanced, go to Wrapper, Layout, Advanced, and set our z-index to something like 5. Now we have established our overlay effect. The next thing we need to do is set up our sticky positioning. So we'll open up Animations, Sticky, set the position to top. And we probably want to disable that at about Tablet Portrait. Now if we scroll down, you'll see we have a sticky overlay header with a transparent background. Now before we move on to anything else, let's make sure that this design looks good and works well on various screen sizes. Let's scroll all the way back up to the top, and let's use our viewport chooser to switch to Tablet Landscape. And you can see we have a bit of an issue here. This columns element doesn't really gracefully fall down by default, so we'll want to duplicate it and make some adjustments. The technique I'm going to show you is pretty common for responsive design, where we're actually going to swap out the entire columns element depending on the breakpoint. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we don't see both of them at the same time. So this first one works perfectly on desktop, but not on smaller viewports. So let's go to the Settings tab and go to Hide on Breakpoint, and then we'll choose our breakpoints. We want to hide it everywhere except for desktop. And we'll see that that's indicated by it being kind of faded out here in the preview. Now we'll just do the opposite on the next columns element. We'll go to Settings, Hide on Breakpoint, and we will hide on Desktop, but nowhere else. Now let's make some adjustments to this columns element. We'll go over to the Design tab, Size, and for the height, we want to say Fit to Content. But first, let's go down to Custom and make sure this is cleared out. There we go. Now we can swap back to Fit to Content. Now we just need to change the height of this left column or top column that has the picture in it. So we'll go to Size, and we'll set the minimum height to 500 pixels. That looks pretty good. So now on smaller mobile devices, this is the layout people will see. But on desktop, they will see the first columns element. Let's go back to our breakpoint and scroll through the rest of our design. That looks good. That looks good. This one, since it's based on the first column, actually needs the same treatment. So let's select our columns element here and duplicate it. And the first one we will hide everywhere except for desktop. And the second one we will hide only on desktop. Now we'll make our responsive adjustments to the second version. Again, we need to go to Design and we need to clear that height. So we'll go to Custom, clear the minimum height, and then set Fit to Content. And then for the column with the background image, we'll go to Size and set the height to 500 pixels. You might want this image to be above the text, just like the first instance of this columns element. We can do that by selecting the columns element itself and going to Layout and choosing When to reverse the order. We want to reverse order on Tablet Landscape, which will move the right column up to the top. That looks pretty good. And then our contact form section looks good as well. Just to be sure, let's step down to a smaller breakpoint, Phone Landscape, and we can see that still looks pretty good. This one's being hidden, so it doesn't matter. And then this grid does need to change a little bit. Let's go up one more here. It looks fine here, but at Phone Landscape, it kind of gets a little cramped. So let's go to Phone Landscape, and let's select our section. Under Layout, we want to change our items per row to 1. And let's scroll through. That looks pretty good. And if we step back up, it'll still be laid out in a 4-item grid. Using those techniques, you can now basically make any design you create completely responsive in just a few minutes. But now we're going to move on to making sure our header and our footer show up on every page on our site. If you want an element like your header or footer to show up everywhere on your site, it needs to be a template. So I'll show you where we can create header and footer templates in Breakdance. If we go up to our quick navigator here, we can click the plus icon to create a new post. But it's important to note that basically everything is a post, including header and footer templates. So we'll choose header, we'll call it header main, and we'll save. Now let's hover over this and edit the settings, and we'll click location everywhere and save that. Now let's hop over to that by clicking it. And there's nothing in here yet. So we need to add our header that we just designed. But it's on another page. Luckily, the design library feature makes it easy to grab it and pull it over. So we'll click Add and we'll go to Library. And under Design Set, make sure this website is chosen. Now you'll see all of your sections. And if you hover over them, you'll get a button to add them to the page. So I'll just click Add to Page. And now my header is in the header template. Let's go ahead and save that. And then let's do the same thing for the footer. So we'll add a new footer template, choose footer, call it footer main, and save. Then we'll go to settings, make sure it applies everywhere, and save that. Now we can click in to edit it. And again, we can use the design library to pull that in. So we'll scroll to the bottom, find our footer, and click Add to Page. Now let's save. But now we just need to remove these from the home page because we don't want two headers and footers on the home page. So we'll swap back over to Home. And we'll remove the top section. And we'll remove the footer section as well. Now let's save. And on the front end, if we refresh, you'll see we have our header, overlaying and sticky, and all of our sections, as well as our footer. But the header and footer will appear on every page. And since we're about to set up some other areas on the website that you can go to, that will come in handy. But before we move on, we do need to link up these buttons to their respective sections. Remember, I used IDs for the links on these elements, which means they need to be linked to a section on the page. But there's no section with the proper ID at the moment, so it doesn't work. So let's jump back into Breakdance and let's take care of that. On this button, I linked it to the ID intro. So we'll select this section, go to Settings, Advanced, and give it an ID of intro. And then let's find the other button that was linked to a section, which is this one. And it's linked to a section with the ID of booking. So we'll go down to our contact section, Settings, Advanced, and give it an ID of booking. Now let's save, jump up to the front end. And if we click Meet Emily, it scrolls us down to this section. If we click Book Emily, it scrolls us down to our contact form. Perfect. The next thing we need to do is set up our blog page. And we're going to do that via a template as well. So we'll go up here to our quick navigator, click Add, and we'll choose Template. And we'll call it Blog Post Index and save. Now let's edit the settings. And it needs to apply to all archives. And we'll save. Now let's jump over to that template. And we'll use the library again to pull sections from our homepage. I think for my blog post index, I want to do something like, of course, this section. And we'll swap out the content. I want to change the background image on this to my books here. And then we need to tweak the position. So let's go to Image Settings and let's adjust this. That looks better. And then here we'll change this text to read. And then we'll say Recent Writings. And let's paste in some text here as well. And let's update the button to link to a section with the ID of posts. And we'll need to make these adjustments to our mobile version of this section as well, which luckily we can do pretty easily. So we'll swap out the background image, change the positioning to right center, and then we'll update the text. Recent writings, paste in this text, and then update this to posts. And let's change the text to read more, and do the same thing up here. Perfect. So there's the hero section for our blog page. Now we just need the section that actually displays our posts. So we'll click Add, go to Library, and we'll use this section here from the home page. And we don't need any of these elements, so we'll delete them. And we'll click the plus icon and search for Post List. And click that to drop it in. Now we'll go over to Design, go to List, and change the layout to List. Now all of our posts are displayed. Next, we need a template to show the post content itself. So we'll save this. And from the quick navigator, we'll click the plus icon. And we'll call this template Single Post. And under post type, we'll choose Template. Save. And then we'll edit those settings and make sure it applies to all single posts. And click Save. Now let's swap over to that template. Now let's add from our library again, and let's scroll down. I think that we'll use this same section again to make sure the width is consistent. And now we just need to use something called dynamic data to display the post title and content. So let's select the heading, we'll change it to an H1, and then we'll click the dynamic data icon next to the text control label. And under the post area, we'll choose Post Title. Now we'll select this text element, go over to the Content tab, and do the same thing, except for this time, we'll choose Post Content. And now we can get rid of this button. This template will now apply to all of our blog posts, so if we swap to a different one, we'll see different content. So with that done, we now have a fully functional website. Let's hop up to the front end and take a quick tour. Let's go to the home page. And we see our nice entrance animation, our hero area. We can click the button to scroll down to the little bio section here. Then we have our grid section, and if we continue scrolling down, another animated 2-column section. And we can click this button to go down to our contact form. If we go to blog, we can now see all of our blog posts, but it doesn't look like it's actually using the template we set up. If you run into this kind of an issue, you'll need to go to the Breakdance templates area in the dashboard. Let me show you where that's at. Under Breakdance templates, you'll find all the templates we created. So here we have our blog post index template. And if we go to settings and hit continue, we can see that it's applied to all archives, but we may want it to be applied to the post archive specifically so that it applies to the blog post index provided by WordPress. Now that that change has been made, if we go over here and refresh, we'll see the actual template that we set up. And if we scroll down, we'll see our posts. And if we click read more on one of our posts, we see the post content. As you can see, even the free version of Breakdance is incredibly capable. So if you need to build a simple personal website or even a basic website for a business, the free version of Breakdance is a great option.